Pennsylvania failed to remove 277,000 registrants who did not respond to removal notifications. That's so many people. 753 notices like you're going to be canceled. It's crazy.
The other thing that has me worried is that the Jewish vote in the suburban areas, Biden won the Jewish vote by 70%, 70-30 last time. Some polls show Kamala at 50-50.
Oh! In Pennsylvania, a federal judge is now saying you can't ask too many questions about those 270,000 plus people who are on a list to vote who may not have been checked against the actual list to validate whether they should be voting or not. The lawsuit came from this organization called 1789 Foundation. There were a slew of lawsuits that they filed in multiple different swing states because these issues are much the same. In other words, the states are obligated to maintain their voter lists. One of the ways they do that is by requesting access to the federal databases so the people who register at the state level can be compared and cross-referenced with the federal list. And if you are not a citizen, for example, you get booted off the list. Well, the problem is the states are not doing the work. They're just not interfacing with those databases, and they haven't been doing it for some time. So there's a bunch of problematic names on the list. Now, here's what this says. It says this lawsuit seeks to enforce the public inspection and list maintenance provisions of the National Voter Registration Act. You have to check the list. It says requiring that Pennsylvania must maintain voter registration lists by removing ineligible voters. Under the NVRA, voter removal is mandated when registrants move, when they fail to respond to a confirmation notice, and when they don't vote in the next two federal elections. Okay, so a bunch of people theoretically could have gotten a notice, still be on the rolls, and not removed. Now, the NVRA, and Jocelyn Benson is using the same thing to keep people on the rolls, provides registrants who fail to respond to confirmation notices protections against premature and improper removal. There's a waiting period, and so that people who don't respond to multiple years may then get removed. Of course, there must be some means of delineating voters who respond to their confirmation and others who do not. So you get a notice. If you don't do anything, we're going to take you off the list. For that reason, those who do not respond to the confirmation notices are referred to as inactive. Now, the term inactive does not mean that the registrant is not eligible to vote or is prohibited from voting. In fact, all inactive registrants are registered voters. An inactive registration merely is a demarcation that's attributed to registrants who do not respond to confirmation, that they might be removed. Now, the NVRA is also cognizant of the need to protect the fundamental right to vote. Now, according to Pennsylvania's statistics from the Secretary of State, this is where it gets interesting, they reported to the Election Assistance Commission that there are at least 277,000 inactive registrants who were sent confirmation notices prior to the 2020 general election. That's 2 federal election cycles ago via forwarded mail who did not respond. And 2 federal elections have lapsed. But guess what? All 277,000 names are remaining registered to vote in November. So if the national law says you got to maintain this stuff, you got to remove the inactives after 2 cycles, why haven't you done that? Now, upon learning of this, Citizen AG submitted an open records request back on October 4th, and pursuant to NVRA's public inspection provision and Pennsylvania state law, requesting to inspect or receive copies of these, we did that. On October 11th, the Secretary's office sent, quote, an interim response stating, well, we'll send you the list, but it's going to take another 30 days. Under Pennsylvania law, that's a denial. So we now commence this action to get those records, to protect the fundamental right to vote. Without the injunctive relief, without knowing who is on this list and removing these people, there is no way to distinguish which of the 277,000 registrants are eligible and which of them should have been removed under the law. Remember, federal law makes this removal mandatory. So Citizen AG and Pennsylvania members have a legitimate concern about this. Millions of Pennsylvanians are concerned with the integrity of the electoral process, and this concern translates into discouragement to voting. Due to the irreparable harm, we're filing a motion to stop Secretary Schmidt from ignoring the federal law, the NVRA, and make these numbers, make available the records that we've requested available for inspection, saying the court has jurisdiction and the law makes this mandatory. Federal law makes removal mandatory. A voter with an inactive registration may still vote even on election day, but the rules say there's a maintenance process. We have all these statutes that make this happen. And so we know what the gist of this is. We also have this affidavit, this declaration from Eric Scharfenberger. He says, I'm over 18. If called upon to testify, I could tell you the following. Says, I'm the director of operations for 1789. Citizen AG is dedicated to protecting the rights of American voters. Says there's a variety of reasons voter rights can be diluted. And so in furtherance of an investigation into Pennsylvania, he says, I discovered inconsistencies with the statistics reported to the Election Assistance Commission that revealed that Pennsylvania failed to remove 277,000 registrants who did not respond to removal notifications. Says more specifically, upon reviewing their responses, I discovered that Pennsylvania sent out 753 confirmation notices before 2020. Of the 753, look, that's so many people. 753 notices like you're going to be canceled. It's crazy. 116,000 of them responded. So it's a very low return rate. Based on these figures, a minimum of 637,000 people were sent confirmation notices and did not respond. Now, under the law, the federal law, registrants who do not respond to confirmation notices have their registrations switched to inactive for the statutory waiting period, which is the next 2 federal cycles. The 2022 midterm is the second federal election, and that was concluded. So in this report from 2022, which was published in 2023, which consisted of information that was collected during a period that began in 2022, Pennsylvania reported that they removed 360,000 people after that cycle. When taking the 637,900 who did not respond to the confirmation notices and subtracting the 360 that they did remove, there's still 277,000 people who did not respond to their confirmation notices that still are registered. Now, under the NVRA, each of those peoples who did not vote in 2020 or 2022 because they got the notice before 2020 should be removed. True and correct copies of the reports, they say all of our numbers are here attached as Exhibit 1 and Exhibit 2. If you want to look at them, look at them. Because this data and our records containing this information falls within the scope, I submitted an open records request. And he says, I wasn't late on this either, by the way. Like, I'm not filing this late. October 4th was the earliest date by which I could have submitted my request, as I had just learned of the violations upon which this action is based less than 24 hours prior, because I think he got some data. On October 11th, the Secretary's office sent an interim response. At no time did we agree to an extension. We attached their denial here. And so in order to get here, I've had to expend this guy, Citizen AG, to expend substantial resources to investigate this, saying the resultant impact of this caused us to suffer due to diversion of our resources, because they're just dragging their feet on giving us these details. This diversion includes things like staff hours and other time. And so we're entitled to relief, help identify and maybe segment these, or give us the records, really, is what they're asking for, from Eric Scharfenberger there in Pennsylvania. So interesting filing. Now, the court has come out and said, no, you lose. You're not going to get access to these things. Fresh out of the oven, November 4th, the day before the election, says, okay, you guys sued, and here's why you're not going to win. Says they filed a motion and were asking about injunctions, saying that they're alleging that they violated the National Voter Registration Act. Here, he says, I'll be irreparably harmed. So given these circumstances, the court will proceed with the merits analysis of the pending motion. As we continue, he says the complaint alleges that the request was sent on time, federal holidays, talking about the timeliness of the records request, said they failed to demonstrate a likelihood of success. They've not set forth any viable assertion or argument that they're not going to comply with your records request. Oh, so the judge is just saying, well, you're going to get it. Just relax. You submitted it on October 4th. And so they say they'll give it to you by the 12th. Now, although the court recognizes that the federal election will be held on the 5th, you haven't explained why you need the records before that day. So you'll get them. They're just going to come later. And we're not going to do anything about it in the meantime. He says preliminary, the assertion that there exists 277,000 registrants, they say is purely speculative. As noted by the secretary, he says, well, they say this, but the numbers they cite don't reflect individuals or voters. Rather, as clearly identified in the report, he's saying that these are also sent notices to voters who also may have moved. So their explanation for it is that we often send more than one notice to the same voter. And so you're looking at maybe addresses. So the 753 figure includes multiple notices sent to the same voters. So that number is a list of notices, not a list of voters. Got it. All right, I'm sure. Says they compound this error, saying that these statuses are constantly changing. And so you really can't ever know a number. Says inactive voters could die and all sorts of things. So fails to show how they're out of compliance. They've not demonstrated they're going to suffer any harm. You're going to get the records anyways. And so for the foregoing reasons, they've not met their burden. You're not entitled to an injunction. They're not going to do anything with those voters. You haven't demonstrated you're going to succeed, and you'll get the records. You'll just get them after the election is over. So those votes will count, and you're not going to be able to identify or do anything about it until after the momentum is far beyond. And the challenges will probably have to start anew in the aftermath in new claims. So of course, Pennsylvania is a key state this cycle. A lot of election litigation happening there. And one question that's being asked is about the early voting and when we're going to get votes and returns from Pennsylvania. Are we going to get them election night, or is it going to take multiple days like the Democrats would prefer?
Okay, so you said that you're optimistic about Pennsylvania. Here's something that may cause you concern. Early voting, 2024, Democrats had put in 971,615, Republicans 571,725. Compared to 2020, you're down 42%.
Wow.
Republicans are down 8%. And here is what Jim...
Just look at those numbers. 1.7 million for Democrats in 2022 at about this time, down to under a million. Numbers are huge. Republicans are about the same, a little lower than 2020, which is not good, but their numbers are bad.
Messina said yes on Sunday with Jen Psaki on MSNBC about the early vote. Listen here.
What's their biggest concern right now if you're the Harris team?
Well, look, I think it's a couple things. The early vote numbers are a little scary, and you and I have been texting back and forth. Republicans didn't do what they did last time. Last time Trump said don't early vote, and so they didn't. Republicans do have an advantage in early vote numbers. When the early vote come in, it's going to look a little bit different than 2020, and that's scary.
So he says it's scary what he's seeing in the early vote. What do you say?
I say that I hope folks will get out there and vote if you haven't already. Exercise your right to be a part of our democracy. Yeah. And to your viewers, remember, we won't have final results here in Pennsylvania
but does it
for
concern
several
you?
days.
Does it concern
after
you
November 5th.
It concerns Jim Messina?
Well, sure. I'm concerned about this election all over the country. It is going to be razor thin. We're going to be working on it until the last hour. Part of why I've been campaigning across Pennsylvania and encouraging people to come out and vote for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz is because I think this is very close.
All right, so Pennsylvania Republicans, we got to pump these numbers up. Republicans down 51,000. If you're in Pennsylvania, time to get on that text message horn and text everybody you've ever known or met or loved. Make sure they get out to vote. All right, so we've also got new reports here. You can see same numbers showing from David Chapman. It says early voting in Pennsylvania 2 days out. Big swings. GOP are at their 2020 level turnout. Dem is way low, so Firewall is going bye-bye. Van Jones, not happy about it. You can see a clip from our friend Colin Rugg. Shared this one from Van Jones.
Worried. Philadelphia is where we've got to run up a big margin. But Philly overall has been trending down, not in terms of going toward the Republicans, just people not getting out to vote. And so you got people out there like Pastor Carl Day, who's got a bunch of young men with him, knocking on doors, trying to get people to come out. It's a bigger, tougher fight in Philly to get that vote count up than it has been in the past. That has me worried. The other thing that has me worried is that the Jewish vote in the suburban areas, Biden won the Jewish vote by 70%, 70-30 last time. Some polls show Kamala at 50-50.
Oh,
that is 70,000 votes we bled away. That is the margin for victory. So you got...
Wow, man, Josh Shapiro might have been a smarter pick, huh?
Groups like Zioness, Amanda Berman out there fighting to get the Jewish vote back on board. This is a tough...
Trump campaign doing ads
and
to
the
try
Trump
to...
campaign pushing the other direction. So this is a door-to-door, bruised knuckles, tired legs, a lot of coffee, and I'm nervous and worried, and I'm not going to be anyway until this thing gets called.
Okay, is there anything that is making you happy about Pennsylvania?
No, there's nothing making me happy about Pennsylvania. You got David Urban out there causing us trouble in the rural parts of the state. Get David Urban on this show and keep him here all day, and then I'll feel better.
Just don't let him leave.
I don't want him out there.
All right, so Van Jones getting a little bit nervous on the election results there in Pennsylvania, which is good news for President Trump. And if you're out there in Pennsylvania and you know anybody in Pennsylvania, get them out to vote. It's go time, baby.